For some reason, there is this false narrative out there that exists that it is impossible for black people to be racist, and that can be understood if you know exactly what type of definition or proprietary definition that they're using to describe what racism is. Because for some reason, the definitions have changed and they switched to something which we have never used in human history to describe said phenomena. Now, for the people who say that it is impossible for black people to be racist, they use a definition that includes racial prejudice plus power, essentially saying that racism is racial prejudice plus the ability to discriminate based on that racial prejudice that you have. Now, based off of that definition, prejudice, racial prejudice plus power, it is actually very much possible for black people to be racist. Take, for example, the continent of Africa. Or take, for example, Georgia or Washington, D.C., or any of these major black cities, counties, states in America, or these African nations on Earth. I don't know, the second largest continent on the planet. They can discriminate against white people. And by this definition that these people give, it is very much possible for these Africans to be racist because they can have a racial prejudice. And they have the power because they run the governments and all of these spheres of influence within these African nations and in these counties and in these states in America to affect racial change. And in some instances they have in Africa, with the case of Tanzania or South Africa, where they kill white farm owners, they enact eminent domain upon their land and take it from them. And when they do that, because they have no farmer base amongst the native population, these countries fall and they go into famine. Shout out to communism, shout out to socialism. It always fails. That's a different video. I've given some refutation as to the example that they give as to what racism is, which is prejudice plus power, and showing that it is very much possible for black people to exhibit that racial prejudice plus power. But that's not what racism is. As a matter of fact, let's look up the definition of racism right now, and I'll put it on the screen. Let's go with the first definition that we can find on Google. Racism: prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism by an individual, community, or institution against a person or people on the basis of their membership in a particular racial or ethnic group, typically one that is a minority or marginalized. So based off of this definition, racism is very simple. It is not necessarily a component of it that requires power, that requires a power system or majority system or whatever the case is, to where they try to argue that black people don't hold that, even though in some counties and states they do. In the entire continent of Africa, pretty much they do. It doesn't require power. It's just prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism by an individual. So individual is included in that. So when they try to say individuals can't be racist because they don't have power, well, according to Google, an individual can be racist. An individual can believe in racism, can exhibit racist tendencies, because a requirement of racism is not power. A community or an institution can engage in it, but it's not a requirement, because individuals, communities, and institutions can engage in discrimination against people or a person on the basis of their membership to a particular racial or ethnic group. Now, that's groundwork laid. I've given you false definitions. I've refuted false definitions with logical argumentation to the contrary of how it is very much possible and how it very much happens. Now, there are many black organizations in America that we can name which are very much racially motivated. And because they hide behind the false definition that I gave you at the beginning of this video, where they say that it is impossible for black people to be racist because they hold no power. Well, based off of this definition, that's not possible. Individuals can be racist as well. They can hold racial prejudice and be discriminatory against those. Now, there are a multitude of black organizations that I can list here. Let's just go with some very famous ones. We can name the Nation of Islam. We can name the Hebrew Israelites, which there are many different offshoots of said things. We can name the Black Panther Party, even though that's not that's more so communism and Marxism than racism. But I'll include it in there. We can include whatever fucking Dr. Umar Johnson is, that scammer. That nigga is never building the school, and he's just taking money from dumb individuals, namely women and racists, who just are low IQ. But anyway, I'm naming a bunch of shit. I've given false definitions. I've given refutations of false definitions with logical argumentation and actual real world examples. I've given examples of black organizations within America that are actually very racist. I'll leave a list somewhere in the description or in the comment section of an entire list of these black organizations that you can find and read their doctrines and what they actually believe. And you can argue to me whether or not that's true or not that they're racist. I believe that they are because they are. It fits the definition. But to end off this video, if you are a racist individual, just say so. Don't hide behind the fact of you're a racial minority. Don't hide behind the opinion or the proprietary definition, which exists nowhere else except for maybe in some of your college classes with your gay professor and your gay friends where you're fucking rubbing each other on the back because you're all stupid. You think that you're smart. And because regular people like me don't understand these proprietary definitions and these things that are not out in the common man's fucking vocabulary, you look at us as though we're stupid when that has never been a word in usage ever in the history of America or in the world. So if you're racist, just say so. I would much rather deal with a person who is racially upfront than a person who tries to hide behind things such as their identity and being a woman, being a victim, being black, whatever the case may be. Just be what you are and don't be fucking afraid. Stop being a bitch.